My name is Scarlett, and I am 26 years old. There was a time not too long ago when I had nothing, no job, no reputation, no family I could count on. It all started the day my parents decided to pick up the phone and call every single employer in town to tell them I was a thief. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could bury me so deep I would never climb out. But what they did not know, what they could not have possibly known, is that my grandmother had already seen this coming years before it happened, and she had prepared for everything. Before I take you through this story, I want to know where you are listening from right now. Drop your city or your country in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe that the love of a grandmother can outlast anything, even betrayal. And subscribe to this channel because by the end of this story, I promise you will look at family loyalty and courage in a completely different way. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town in Tennessee, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and front porches were always occupied by someone sipping sweet tea and watching the world pass by. From the outside, our family looked like any other. A two-story house with a green lawn, a mailbox shaped like a little barn, and two kids who went to the local school. But behind that front door, things were never equal. I was the firstborn. My brother Travis came along 3 years after me. And from the moment he arrived, it was like I became invisible. I do not say that for sympathy. I say it because that is what it was. My mother, Diana, had a way of making you feel like you were standing in a room full of people and no one could see you. She never hit me. She never screamed at me in front of strangers. But her silence was louder than any shout. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, she would glance at it, set it down on the counter, and go back to whatever she was doing. When Travis brought home a B minus, she would tape it to the refrigerator and call our neighbor to brag about how hard he had been working. Every August before school started, Travis got new shoes, new jeans, a backpack he picked out himself. I wore what still fit from the year before. If I asked for anything, Diana would say something like, "We cannot afford everything, Scarlett. You are the older one. You understand." But somehow, there was always enough for Travis. Always. When I was 11, I asked if I could take piano lessons. There was a woman down the street who taught out of her living room for $25 a month. Diana shook her head and said it was a waste of money. 2 months later, Travis was enrolled in a traveling soccer league that cost 10 times that amount. I remember sitting at the kitchen table doing homework and hearing Diana on the phone telling someone how talented Travis was on the field, how he might get a scholarship one day. I just stared at my math worksheet and tried to make the numbers blur so I would not have to feel anything. My father, Gordon, was a quiet man. He worked at a supply warehouse on the edge of town. He came home tired, ate dinner, watched television, and went to bed. He rarely spoke to me beyond the basics. Pass the salt, close the door, turn off the light. He was not cruel in an obvious way. He simply was not there. And when Diana made her decisions about how things would be divided between me and Travis Gordon, never once stepped in. His silence was its own kind of agreement. But there was one person who saw me, really saw me. My grandmother Louise lived about 30 minutes away in a small house surrounded by flower beds and wind chimes. Every other weekend, sometimes more, I would go stay with her. Those drives to her place were the only times I felt like I could breathe. The moment I walked through her door, the smell of lavender and baked bread would wrap around me like a blanket. Her kitchen was always warm. Her bookshelves were packed so tight you had to wiggle a book to pull it free. She had a rocking chair by the window where she would sit and read to me when I was small, and later where she would sit and listen to me when I was older and needed someone to hear what I could not say at home. Grandma Louise was not a wealthy woman, but she was rich in the ways that mattered. She taught me how to make cornbread from scratch, how to identify birds by their songs, how to mend a torn hem with a needle and thread. She told me stories about her own life, about growing up on a farm, about losing her husband young, about raising Diana alone, and working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. She never complained about any of it. She just told it like it was. On my 12th birthday, Diana forgot, completely forgot. I came downstairs that morning expecting something, anything, and there was nothing. No card on the table, no candle in a muffin, nothing. Travis did not notice because it was not about him. Gordon had already left for work. I went to school and came home and still nothing. That weekend, I went to Grandma Louise's house, and she had a small cake waiting with 12 candles and a wrapped box on the table. Inside was a silver bracelet with my name engraved on the inside. She clasped it on my wrist and said, "You have something they will never understand, and that is enough." I wore that bracelet every single day after that. 2 months later, Travis turned 9, and Diana threw a party in the backyard with balloons and a store-bought cake and 15 kids from his class. I helped set up the chairs because Diana told me to. Nobody asked me how my birthday had been. The relationship between Diana and Grandma Louise was tense for as long as I could remember. Grandma Louise was a direct woman. She did not believe in pretending things were fine when they were not. More than once, she told Diana straight to her face that the way she treated me was unfair. Diana hated that. She would clench her jaw, change the subject, and later in the car ride home, she would mutter about how her mother always overstepped. Diana tried to limit my visits to Grandma Louise, but she could never fully stop them because Grandma Louise would call me directly. And by the time I was old enough to drive, I went on my own. I graduated high school without any fanfare. No party, no special dinner. Diana and Gordon attended the ceremony because it would have looked strange if they had not. Travis was on his phone the entire time. That summer, I enrolled in community college and started working part-time at a grocery store to pay for my own gas, my own textbooks, my own everything. Grandma Louise helped me when I needed it. $100 here, 50 there, always tucked inside a card with a handwritten note. She never told Diana, and I never asked for more than I needed. I finished my associate degree in business administration 2 years later. I found a small apartment, moved out of my parents' house, and started building a life that was mine. I thought the hardest part was over. I thought that once I was standing on my own 2 feet, the weight I carried from that house would start to lift. I had no idea that my parents were still watching, still waiting, and that the worst was about to come the moment Grandma Louise was gone. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was getting ready for a shift at the grocery store, brushing my teeth, half listening to the radio, when my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. It was a number I did not recognize, which turned out to be the hospital. A woman with a calm, practiced voice told me that my grandmother, Louise Ann Whitfield, had passed away in her sleep the night before, at the age of 79. I stood there with the toothbrush still in my hand, toothpaste dripping into the sink. The water was running, but I could not hear it anymore. Everything around me went muffled, like someone had wrapped the world in cotton. I did not cry right away. I could not. My body just locked up like it was trying to protect me from the thing my brain had already understood, but my heart had not caught up to yet. I called in sick to work. I got in my car. I drove the 30 minutes to her house without turning on the radio, without checking my phone, without thinking about anything at all. When I pulled into her driveway, the flower beds along the walkway were still blooming. The wind chimes on the porch were turning slowly in the breeze. I unlocked the front door with the spare key she had given me years ago, and the moment I stepped inside, the smell of lavender hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. I walked through the kitchen. Her coffee mug was still sitting on the counter next to the sink, rinsed but not put away. A book was open on the armrest of her rocking chair, face down to save her place. She was never going to finish that book. That thought was what finally broke me. I sat down in her chair, pulled my knees up to my chest, and cried until I had nothing left. The funeral was held 4 days later at the small chapel near the center of town. Grandma Louise had planned most of it herself years earlier, down to the hymns and the flowers. She wanted white lilies and no fuss. I made sure that was exactly what she got. Diana and Gordon arrived in their Sunday clothes. Diana's face was composed careful, like she was attending a business function, rather than her own mother's funeral. She did not cry, not once. She walked through the door, looked around the chapel as if assessing the arrangements, and chose a seat in the front row. Gordon followed her hands in his pockets, his expression flat and unreadable. Travis arrived 20 minutes late, slid into a pew near the back, and spent most of the service looking at his phone under the edge of the wooden seat in front of him. I was the one who stood up and spoke. I read a short passage from a book Grandma Louise loved, a few lines about how the people we lose never truly leave because they live on in every kindness they planted in us. My voice cracked twice, but I made it through. When I looked out at the small gathering, I saw a few of her neighbors dabbing their eyes. Diana sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed somewhere above my head, and I could almost see the gears turning behind her eyes. She was not mourning, she was calculating. 1 week after the funeral, we received a call from Grandma Louise's attorney. Margot asked the whole family to come to her office for the reading of the will. I had never met Margot before, but Grandma Louise had mentioned her from time to time. She described her as one of the few people in this world who says what she means and means what she says. Margot's office was in a small brick building on the main street of the next town over. When I walked in, Diana and Gordon were already seated. Diana had her purse on her lap and her legs crossed tight. Gordon sat beside her like a statue. Travis was not there. Margot came in and closed the door behind her. She was around 50 with short silver hair, round glasses, and a voice that was low and clear, the kind of voice that made you listen whether you wanted to or not. She sat behind her desk, opened a folder, and began reading. Grandma Louise had left her house her savings account and a trust fund to me. To Diana and Gordon, she left a small symbolic amount and a sealed personal letter. To Travis, she left nothing. For about 3 seconds, the room was silent. Then Diana stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Her face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. She started talking, but it was more like a pressure valve releasing. She said that her mother had always favored me, that I had poisoned Grandma Louise against the rest of the family, that I had manipulated a vulnerable old woman into rewriting her will. She looked straight at me and said, "You manipulated her. You poisoned her against us. This is not over." Gordon did not speak. He just gripped the armrest of his chair so hard his knuckles went white. Diana grabbed her purse, yanked the door open, and walked out. Gordon followed. Neither of them looked back. After they left the room, felt 10 degrees cooler. I sat there staring at the floor, my pulse hammering in my ears. Margot waited a moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a separate yellow envelope. She slid it across the desk toward me. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you only after the reading," Margot said. "She told me you would need it, but not right away. Keep it somewhere safe." I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. I did not open it. I was too raw, too drained. I thanked Margot, walked to my car, and placed the envelope in the glove compartment. I pulled out of the parking lot with a chest that felt like it was being crushed from the inside. In the span of 7 days, I had lost the person who loved me most in this world, and I had lost whatever thin thread still connected me to my parents. I did not know it then, but Diana and Gordon had already started planning their retaliation before they even made it home that night. 3 weeks after the reading of the will, I decided it was time to find something steadier than my part-time grocery job. I had my degree, I had some experience, and I was ready to build something real. I cleaned up my resume, printed out a stack of copies, and started applying to every open position I could find within a 30-mile radius. The first place that called me back was a restaurant on the east side of town called Birch and Barrel. A man named Derek managed the place. He was in his early 40s, friendly, organized, and clearly looking for someone who could handle a fast-paced environment. The interview lasted 45 minutes and went better than I expected. Derek said he was impressed with how I carried myself, that he liked my directness, and that he would call me within 2 days to discuss next steps. 2 days passed. No call. I waited one more day, then dialed the restaurant. Derek picked up, and immediately I could tell something had changed. His voice was tight, careful, like he was choosing each word before letting it out. He said they had decided to go with another candidate. When I asked if there was any feedback he could share, he paused for a long time and then said, I just think it is best if we move in a different direction." He hung up before I could respond. It stung, but I told myself that rejection is part of the process. I kept going. The second application was for a sales position at a home goods store about 15 minutes from my apartment. The interview went smoothly. The hiring manager smiled through the whole conversation and told me she thought I would be a great fit. 4 days later, I received a short email. "After careful consideration, we have determined that you are not the right match for our company culture at this time." No explanation, no invitation to apply again, just a clean, cold dismissal. Something felt wrong. 2 strong interviews, 2 rejections with vague reasoning. But I pushed the thought down and kept moving. The third application was for a counter position at a bakery called Golden Grain on the south side of town. The owner, a woman named Patrice, was warm and talkative. She told me about how she started the bakery with her late husband, how she needed someone dependable for the morning shift, and how she could tell right away that I was a hard worker. She said she would call me Monday with the official offer. Monday came and the phone rang. But the voice on the other end was not the same Patrice I had met. It was clipped uncomfortable, almost apologetic. She said she would not be able to bring me on after all. I asked why. There was a long silence. Then Patrice said something that knocked the air out of my lungs. "Someone called the shop. A man. He said he was your father. He told me that you have a history of stealing from your employers. He said he was calling as a courtesy so I would not make the mistake of hiring you. I am sorry, Scarlett. I just cannot take that kind of risk with my business." I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it like it had just spoken a language I did not understand. My father. My own father had called this woman and lied about me. I sat in my car for a long time after that call. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against my thighs to make them stop. Then I picked up my phone and called Gordon. He answered on the third ring. His voice was flat, unhurried, like he had been expecting this. "Why?" I said. "Why would you do that?" He did not deny it. He did not hesitate. He said, "Your mother and I called a few places. We felt it was important to let people know what kind of person they might be hiring." "I have never stolen anything in my life," I said. My voice cracked and I hated myself for it. "You took what belonged to this family," Gordon said. "Consider this the consequence." Then he hung up. I sat in that parking lot until the sun dropped below the tree line. I did not drive home right away because I did not trust my hands on the wheel. The betrayal was not coming from a stranger, not from a competitor, not from someone who had a reason to dislike me. It was coming from the 2 people who were supposed to be my safety net. My parents were actively trying to make sure I could not feed myself, could not pay my rent, could not survive. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I did not turn on the lights. I locked the door, dropped onto my bed, and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since Grandma Louise died, I felt completely alone. That night, I asked myself a question that sat on my chest like a stone. If the people who brought you into this world want to destroy you, who is left to believe in you? And then lying there in that dark room, I remembered the yellow envelope, the one Margot had given me, the one still sitting in my glove compartment untouched. It was almost 2 in the morning when I went outside in my bare feet and opened the passenger door of my car. The envelope was exactly where I had left it, tucked in the glove compartment behind a stack of napkins and an old registration card. I carried it back inside, sat down at my kitchen table under the single overhead light, and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, there were 3 things. The first was a handwritten letter 4 pages long in Grandma Louise's careful slanted handwriting. The second was a notarized copy of her will, with detailed legal annotations in the margins. The third was a business card belonging to Margot, and on the back, written in Grandma Louise's hand, were 7 words: "Call her when they come after you." I read that line 3 times before I picked up the letter. Grandma Louise started by saying that she hoped I would never need to read what she was about to write. She said she hoped Diana and Gordon would accept her decision with grace and move on. But she knew her daughter. She had raised her, and she had watched her become someone who valued pride and possession above everything else. So she had planned for the worst. She explained that the trust fund was structured specifically so that no legal challenge from Diana could touch it. Margot had helped her build it with multiple layers of protection, including a clause that stated any beneficiary who contested the will would automatically forfeit their symbolic inheritance. Grandma Louise had thought of everything. Then the letter turned personal. She wrote about the day she decided to change her will. It was 3 years before she passed. Diana had come to visit for the first time in months. She did not ask about her mother's health. She did not ask about the garden, or the leak in the kitchen ceiling, or the stray cat Grandma Louise had been feeding. She sat down at the kitchen table and asked how much the house was worth. She asked whether Grandma Louise had looked into selling it. She said she had been talking to a real estate agent who thought the property could fetch a good price. Grandma Louise told me she sat there listening to her own daughter treat her home like an asset to be liquidated. And that same weekend, I had driven 30 minutes to bring her a pot of chicken soup because she had mentioned a sore throat on the phone. I sat with her for 4 hours that Sunday, reading aloud from a novel she liked while she rested on the couch. I did not ask about the house. I did not ask about money. I asked her if she was feeling better. That was the moment she wrote when she knew. She called Margot the following Monday and began the process of rewriting everything. Toward the end of the letter, Grandma Louise's tone shifted. She wrote that she did not want me to live in anger. She said, "Protect yourself, but do not become them. You are better than that." She told me that strength is not about winning a fight. It is about knowing which fights are worth having and walking away from the ones that would cost you your peace. She also mentioned a man named Thornton, who owned an antique shop in the center of town. She said he was an old and trusted friend, someone she had known for decades, and if I ever needed work or a safe place to land, I should go to him and tell him who I was. The last line of the letter said, "I cannot be there to hold your hand anymore, Scarlett, but I have left you everything I could. Use it wisely, and remember that you were always, always enough." I set the letter down on the table and pressed both palms flat against the wood to stop myself from shaking. Then I picked up Margot's card, turned it over, and looked at those 7 words again. Call her when they come after you. At 8:30 the next morning, I dialed Margot's number. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when I would hear from you," she said. There was no surprise in her voice, only readiness. I told her everything. The 3 job rejections, Gordon's phone calls, what Patrice had said, the admission Gordon made when I confronted him. Margot listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What your parents are doing has a legal name. It is called defamation. In Tennessee, making false statements about someone to a third party that damage their reputation or their ability to earn a living is actionable. If we can document this, we have a case." She told me to start collecting evidence immediately. She said to contact every employer who had turned me down, explain the situation, and ask if they would be willing to confirm in writing or by email that they received a call from someone claiming to be my father. She told me to write down every date, every name, every detail I could remember. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen and started making calls. Derek at Birch and Barrel said he was sorry, but could not get involved. The hiring manager at the home goods store did not return my call. But Patrice at Golden Grain listened, and after a long pause, she said, "I believe you, Scarlett. I will send you an email confirming what happened. No one should have to go through this." That night, I read Grandma Louise's letter one more time. But this time I did not cry from grief. I cried, because even though she was gone, even though I could not hear her voice or feel her hand on my shoulder, she was still protecting me. Her love had reached past death and was holding me up from the other side. The next morning, I drove to the center of town and parked in front of a narrow storefront with a hand-painted sign that read, "Thornton and Sons Fine Antiques Established, 1968. The window display was cluttered in the best possible way. A brass telescope next to a porcelain vase, next to a wooden jewelry box with a cracked lid. The door had a bell that chimed when I pushed it open, and the air inside smelled like beeswax and old wood, and something faintly sweet that I could not place. A man appeared from behind a tall bookcase near the back. He was around 70 with a slight stoop in his shoulders, wire-rimmed glasses, and eyes that were sharp and kind at the same time. He wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at me like he was trying to place my face. "My name is Scarlett," I said. "Louise Whitfield was my grandmother." His expression changed immediately. The polite curiosity melted into something warmer, something that looked like recognition and tenderness mixed together. He set down the cloth and walked toward me. "Louise talked about you many times," he said. "She was very proud of you. I am sorry for your loss. She was one of the finest people I have ever known." He did not ask me for a resume. He did not ask me for references. He walked me through the shop, showed me how the inventory was organized, explained how he priced items and dealt with customers. And by the end of that first hour, he handed me an apron and said I could start the next day. Working for Mr. Thornton was unlike anything I had experienced before. The pace was slow and deliberate. Every object in the store had a history, and he knew most of them by heart. A mahogany clock from an estate in Virginia, a set of ceramic figurines that had traveled from a farmhouse in Kentucky to a flea market in Georgia before ending up on his shelf. He treated each item with a kind of reverence, and slowly I began to understand that this was more than a business to him. It was a way of honoring the past. One week into my new job, the phone on the counter rang during a quiet afternoon. Mr. Thornton answered. I was in the back room organizing a shipment of picture frames when I heard his tone shift from friendly to steel. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he hung up, he came to find me. "That was a man who said he was your father," Mr. Thornton said calmly. "He told me you cannot be trusted around money or merchandise. He suggested I check my inventory carefully." My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to explain to defend myself, but Mr. Thornton held up his hand. "I have known Louise for 40 years, he said. "I trust her judgment more than the words of any man I have never met. You do not owe me an explanation, but I want you to know that I will testify to this call if you ever need me to." I nodded, unable to speak. He patted my shoulder once and went back to polishing a set of silver candlesticks as if nothing had happened. Around that same time, I began spending my lunch breaks outside on the sidewalk because the fresh air helped me think. The shop next door was a small flower store, and the woman who worked there often sat outside too, eating a sandwich on the bench between our two storefronts. Her name was Nina. She was around 30 with short hair that fell just above her shoulders, an easy laugh, and a way of talking that made you feel like she had known you for years, even if you had just met. Over the course of several lunch breaks, Nina and I went from nodding hello to sharing stories. She told me about her divorce, about starting over in a new town, about the days when arranging flowers was the only thing that kept her sane. And eventually I told her about Grandma Louise, about the will, about what my parents were doing. Nina set her sandwich down and stared at me. "That is not parenting," she said. "That is sabotage. Those people are trying to burn your life down because they did not get what they wanted." It was the first time someone outside of Margot and Mr. Thornton had heard the full story and reacted with the kind of raw honesty I needed. Nina did not try to fix it. She did not offer empty comfort. She just looked at me and said, "You did not deserve any of this, and you do not have to carry it alone." Then things escalated further. Diana, apparently not satisfied with Gordon's phone campaign, took matters into her own hands. She wrote a long public post on social media, accusing me of exploiting Grandma Louise during her final years. She claimed I had pressured a frail, confused old woman into changing her will. She said I had a pattern of dishonesty and that multiple employers had let me go because of it. The post was shared within the local community groups, and in a town this small that meant everyone saw it. The effects were immediate and ugly. I went to the grocery store 2 days later, and a woman who used to live on our street saw me in the produce aisle. She made eye contact, then turned her cart around and walked the other way. At the post office, I handed my package to the clerk and watched her lean over to whisper something to her coworker while glancing in my direction. At the gas station, a man I did not even recognize said loudly to his friend, "That is the one who stole from her own grandmother." Each one of these moments was like a small cut. Alone, they were bearable. Together, they were bleeding me dry. But I remembered what Grandma Louise wrote: document everything. So I did. I took screenshots of Diana's post. I saved every comment. I photographed the timestamps. I compiled everything into a folder on my phone and sent it all to Margot. Margot reviewed the evidence that evening and called me back within the hour. Her voice was steady but firm. "We have more than enough," she said. "The social media post alone is clear public defamation. Combined with the employer calls, this is a strong case. I am sending a cease and desist letter to Diana and Gordon tomorrow morning." When that letter went out the following day, I knew there was no turning back. I was standing up against my own parents in a court of law. My chest ached with a pain that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with grief. Grief for the family I never had. Grief for the parents who chose pride over their own daughter. But somewhere beneath all of that, I could hear Grandma Louise's voice steady, as always telling me that protecting myself was not a betrayal. It was a right. The cease and desist letter did not stop them. If anything, it made Diana angrier. Within a week of receiving it, she filed a counter lawsuit. Her claim was that Grandma Louise had not been of sound mind when she signed the will, and that I had exerted undue influence over a vulnerable elderly woman. She wanted the court to invalidate the entire document. Gordon, meanwhile, kept calling. I learned later from Margot that he had contacted at least 2 more businesses where I had recently submitted applications: a pet supply store and an auto parts shop. Both quietly withdrew my applications without telling me why. I only found out when Margot's investigator confirmed it through follow-up calls. Diana also took a more personal approach. She mailed handwritten letters to several of our old neighbors in the neighborhood where I grew up. In each one, she repeated the same accusations. Scarlett had been fired for stealing. Scarlett had tricked her grandmother. Scarlett was not to be trusted. She even included photocopies of the symbolic check from the will, the tiny amount Grandma Louise had left her, as if to prove how little she had been valued. The day I found out about the counter lawsuit, I was standing behind the counter at Mr. Thornton's shop, rearranging a display of antique pocket watches. My phone buzzed, and I saw Margot's name. I stepped into the back room and answered. "They filed," Margot said. "They are claiming diminished capacity. They want the will thrown out." I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. For the first time since all of this started, I felt a crack form in the armor I had been building around myself. A small, tired voice in my head whispered something I had been refusing to acknowledge. Maybe it would be easier to just give them what they want. Maybe if I handed everything back, they would leave me alone, and I could live my life in peace. I did not realize I had been standing there in silence for several minutes, until I heard footsteps. Mr. Thornton appeared in the doorway. He did not ask what had happened. He just looked at me for a moment, then walked to the small table where he kept a kettle, poured a cup of tea, and set it down beside me. He pulled up a stool, sat next to me, and said nothing for a while. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Louise did not raise a quitter, and she did not prepare all of this for you to give up." That sentence hit me harder than anything Diana or Gordon had ever said, because it was true. Grandma Louise did not spend 3 years building a legal fortress around me so that I could surrender the moment the walls were tested. I picked up the tea, I drank it, and I called Margot back. The preparation for court took 3 weeks. Margot worked with a precision that reminded me of Grandma Louise. Every document was organized, every argument was mapped out, every potential challenge was anticipated. She gathered medical records from Grandma Louise's physician, Dr. Abrams, which showed that Grandma Louise had been in good cognitive health up until her final months. She obtained a sworn statement from the notary, who had witnessed the signing of the will, confirming that Grandma Louise was alert, articulate, and fully aware of what she was doing. She collected the email from Patrice, the testimony Mr. Thornton was prepared to give, and the screenshots of Diana's social media post. The day of the hearing arrived on a Thursday in mid-October. The courthouse was a squat brown building on the edge of the county seat with fluorescent lights and linoleum floors that squeaked under every step. I wore the only professional outfit I owned, a navy blouse and gray slacks that I had bought secondhand for job interviews that never led anywhere. On my wrist was the silver bracelet Grandma Louise had given me on my 12th birthday. I had not taken it off since the day she clasped it on. Diana and Gordon were already seated on the other side of the courtroom when I walked in. Diana was dressed impeccably, her hair done, her posture rigid with confidence. Gordon sat beside her, hands folded in his lap, staring at the table in front of him. Travis did not come. Judge Patricia Calloway entered the room, and everyone stood. She was a woman in her 60s, with white hair, cut short, sharp eyes behind thin glasses, and a voice that carried authority without needing volume. She opened the proceedings by reading the summary of both claims. The original will challenge filed by Diana and Gordon, and the defamation counterclaim filed by me through Margot. Diana's attorney spoke first. He was a young man in an expensive suit who spoke quickly and used words like cognitive decline and susceptibility to manipulation. He argued that Grandma Louise, in her late 70s, had been influenced by me during a period of mental fragility. He painted a picture of a lonely old woman being taken advantage of by a granddaughter who saw an opportunity. Then it was Margot's turn. She stood, slowly adjusted her glasses, and laid out the facts like bricks in a wall. She presented Dr. Abrams's medical records showing that Grandma Louise had attended regular checkups and had no documented signs of dementia or cognitive impairment at any point. She called the notary public to the stand, a woman named Grace Pendleton, who testified that Grandma Louise had been one of the most composed and deliberate clients she had ever witnessed. Grace said Grandma Louise had not only signed the documents clearly, but had explained unprompted exactly why she was distributing her estate the way she was. Margot then shifted to the defamation counterclaim. She entered the email from Patrice into evidence, in which Patrice confirmed that a man identifying himself as my father had called the bakery and stated that I had a history of theft. She called Mr. Thornton to the stand. He described the phone call from Gordon, recounted the exact words used, and confirmed that he had documented the date and time immediately after hanging up. His voice was calm and certain, the voice of a man who had nothing to gain and nothing to hide. Then Margot presented the screenshots of Diana's social media post. The judge reviewed them carefully. The post was projected on a screen for the courtroom to see. Every accusation, every comment underneath, every share. Diana shifted in her seat. Gordon did not look up. The moment that changed everything came near the end. Margot asked my permission, and I gave it. She read aloud a passage from Grandma Louise's letter, the one that had been submitted as part of the evidence package. It was the part where Grandma Louise explained why she left everything to me. Scarlett never asked me for anything. She gave me her time, her laughter, her Sundays. That is worth more than anything I own. The courtroom went silent. I pressed my fingertips against the bracelet on my wrist and felt the engraved letters of my name. Tears slid down my face, but I did not look away. Judge Calloway spent a long time reviewing the documents in front of her. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured and deliberate. She ruled that the will was valid, that there was no credible evidence of diminished capacity or undue influence, that Grandma Louise had acted freely, clearly, and with full knowledge of her decisions. Diana and Gordon's challenge was dismissed. On the defamation claim, the judge ruled in my favor. She ordered Diana and Gordon to pay damages, to remove all public posts making false statements about me, and to send written letters of apology to every employer they had contacted. She noted from the bench that the conduct described was not a disagreement between family members. It was a deliberate campaign to destroy a young woman's livelihood, and it would not be tolerated. Diana stood up. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Gordon took her arm and led her out of the courtroom without making eye contact with anyone. I walked outside into the late afternoon sun. The air smelled like fallen leaves and damp earth. I stood on the courthouse steps and took a breath so deep, it felt like the first one I had taken in months. It was not a feeling of victory. It was not about winning. It was the feeling of being free. That evening, I did not celebrate. I drove to Grandma Louise's house, parked in the driveway, and sat on the front porch as the sky turned from gold to deep blue. The garden had gone neglected in the months since she passed. The lavender was leggy and dry. The rose bushes had grown wild. Weeds had pushed up through the cracks in the stone walkway. I sat there for a long time listening to the wind chimes she had hung from the porch ceiling, the ones shaped like little birds. Then I went to the shed, found her gardening gloves and her watering can, and started tending to the lavender. It was dark by the time I stopped. From that night on, I went to Grandma Louise's house every morning before work. 15 minutes, sometimes 20. I watered the plants, I pulled weeds, I pruned the roses. I planted marigolds along the walkway, because they were the one flower she always said reminded her of sunshine even on cloudy days. That garden became my daily conversation with her. I did not need words. I just needed my hands in the soil and the quiet certainty that she was still with me in every bloom that came back to life. At the shop, mister. Shop? Thornton began teaching me more than just how to run a register. He showed me how to identify the age of wood by its grain, how to spot a reproduction from an original, how to listen when a customer told the story behind an item they were selling. He said something one afternoon that stayed with me. He picked up a chipped teacup that most people would have thrown away and said, "This cup has been through 100 years and 4 owners. Everyone else saw damage. I see endurance." I looked at that cup, and I saw myself. Nina became the closest friend I had ever had. She did not try to replace what I had lost. She simply showed up. On days when the weight pressed down hard, she would walk into the antique shop with 2 coffees and sit with me in the back room until the pressure eased. On better days, she dragged me out for dinner at the diner near the highway or to a weekend flea market where we spent hours laughing over ridiculous finds. She gave me something I had not realized I was missing: normalcy, a life that included joy. With the legal matters resolved, I sat down with Margot to discuss the trust fund. I did not want to spend it carelessly. Grandma Louise had worked her whole life for that money, and I wanted it to mean something beyond my own comfort. After several conversations, I decided to use a portion of it to restore Grandma Louise's house and turn the ground floor into a small community space. I called it Louise's Corner. It was nothing grand, just a room with bookshelves, comfortable chairs, a kettle that was always warm, and a sign on the door that read, "Everyone is welcome." I imagined it as a place where women in town who were going through difficult times could come and sit and breathe and not be alone. It was exactly the kind of thing Grandma Louise would have done if she had thought of it herself. Diana and Gordon complied with the court's orders. The social media posts came down. The letters of apology were sent to the employers, though I was told they were brief and mechanical, written by their lawyer rather than by them. They did not reach out to me. No call, no message, no attempt to repair what they had broken. Travis, though, surprised me. About 3 months after the hearing, I received a text message from his number. It said, "I am sorry I never said anything." 5 words. I stared at them for a long time. I did not reply that day. I was not ready. But I did not delete the message either. I saved it in a folder on my phone and told myself that maybe one day I would respond. But that day was not today, and I made peace with that. Healing did not happen all at once. There were mornings when I woke up and the first thought in my head was the sound of Gordon's voice on the phone saying, "Consider this the consequence." There were afternoons when I caught myself checking the shop door every time it opened, half expecting Diana to walk in with a new accusation. There were nights when I lay in bed and missed Grandma Louise so much it felt like a physical ache in my ribs. But those moments became less frequent. And in between them, there were other things. The smell of coffee in Nina's car, the sound of Mr. Thornton humming while he polished brass, the sight of marigolds blooming along the walkway of Grandma Louise's house, the feeling of a customer at Louise's corner, thanking me for creating a space where she felt safe. One evening, about 6 months after the trial, I sat on the front porch of Grandma Louise's house and read her letter one final time. I had read it so many times by then that I knew every word, every curve of her handwriting, every place where the ink had pressed harder, because she was writing something she felt deeply. When I finished, I folded the pages, carefully placed them inside the small wooden box she kept on her bedside table, the one where she stored things that mattered most, and closed the lid. I looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear, and I said quietly, "Thank you, Grandma. I am okay now." Grandma Louise taught me something that took me a long time to understand. Protecting yourself does not mean becoming bitter. Forgiveness does not mean going back for more pain. And sometimes the strongest love you will ever receive does not come from the people who were supposed to love you. It comes from the one person who chose you, who saw you, who believed in you so deeply that she spent years building a shield you did not even know existed, just so it would be there when you needed it most. She could not change Diana. She could not fix what was broken in my parents, but she could make sure that their brokenness would not break me. And she did. She did that with a letter, a trust bracelet, and a lifetime of Sundays that I will carry with me until my last breath. So let me ask you something before I go. If someone you loved prepared something for you, not because they doubted you, but because they believed in you enough to plan ahead, would you have the courage to use it? Would you trust that their love was strong enough to carry you even after they were gone? I did. And it changed everything. If this story moved you, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, has there ever been someone in your life who protected you in ways you only understood later? Someone whose love showed up exactly when you needed it most? Share your story below, because I believe every story like that deserves to be heard. If this video touched your heart, please hit that like button so more people can find it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not alone, that love can outlast distance, time, and even the people who try to tear it away from you. Thank you for being here and listening to every word. I hope that wherever you are tonight, you feel the presence of someone who once loved you without conditions. And I hope you carry that love forward the way Grandma Louise taught me to carry mine.